Welcome back to the last in this series of interviews with Layla Fadel. She's the McClatchy Bureau Chief in Baghdad. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you.
So let's say it's 2011. The Americans' policy, certainly the Bush administration policy, was long-term permanent basis, at least a privileged position in when it comes to Iraqi oil. I think early in the occupation there was hopes of actually owning Iraqi oil. And in terms of larger regional interests, showing American strength and certainly leaving behind in Iraq a government that would be considered pro-American. Right now, one doesn't see any of these strategic objectives being met, which means can the U.S. really leave in 2011, and what happens in terms of those considerations?
Well, that's the thing about the agreement, the Arabic version of the agreement, which we translated, that was so shocking, was how different it was from the original, the first proposal by the United States. That first proposal caused such controversy because it asked for 58 bases, long term, no end in sight. It didn't give any dates. It didn't give any change. Currently, under the UN mandate, Iraq is not a sovereign nation. The power players, the power brokers, the king, they're the American military. They're the ones that can make and break the law. And they decide. They can go bomb Syria if they feel there's an important target there. They can do these things. They control the airspace. They can extradite people and take them out of Iraq if they do something wrong, right? So now, with this new agreement, so much will change. Suddenly, the Americans can't just go raid any house in Iraq and take somebody and put them in detention. It's not allowed anymore. You can't put people in detention for 3 years for no reason. No longer possible under this agreement if it's honored. And the idea that in 2011 everybody has to leave, unless there's creative interpretation, of course, that means that the idea of keeping a base here and in a friendly nation in the middle of the Arab world, taking the Arab cornerstone as Iraq is known and making it into a friend and somebody we can turn to and base ourselves inside has changed. And there is no promise that Iraq will stay a friendly nation once we leave. There is no promise, because they are also friendly nations with what seem to be our bitter enemies in the region, with the American bitter enemies. You know, their friendship with America is as strong as their friendship with Iran, and as important, and that's why these negotiations are so difficult, because they have to please America and Iran, which is impossible. So, you know, it just really depends. It also depends on our president-elect and what will happen in the United States and how our foreign policy will change. Iraqis say that the face of the American White House changes, but the policy never does.
So that's a question. But do they have different expectations of Obama or not?
I think the Iraqi government is very afraid, because under the Bush administration, in some ways, they had almost a blank check policy. There are a lot of analysts that talk about how the reason the negotiations went the way they did was because the Americans negotiated as if they were the weaker power, because the Iraqis knew they could call their bluff and say, fine, go home, and nobody would move and be like, okay, let's negotiate again. Whereas I think Iraqi politicians know that if they did that to the next president who didn't come into Iraq and who wasn't blamed for mistakes and who isn't carrying the burden of success or failure, they won't have that. And so I think part of the reason they had to sign this and get it through and everything finished, because they know under Obama they won't have that. But they also have other things. Maliki and Obama agree on the date of withdrawal, on those types of things.
But when you say they won't have that, what's that?
They won't have unconditional support. They won't have. That's what they are afraid of, and they'll tell you that. They won't talk to you on the record about it, but they are afraid because they had that under President Bush. He had, you know, I think it was daily or weekly conversations with Maliki. He had major diplomats from the United States like Condoleezza Rice saying, Maliki is our man. That isn't necessarily going to happen in the next administration, because as much as Iraq depended on the United States depended on this government to succeed. They needed it to, because that was their success.
And Maliki needs the U.S. troops in terms of this rivalry with all these other factions.
Right.
Right now, Maliki's power is pretty tenuous without the U.S. troops there.
Dawah doesn't have a militia. Who is Dawah's militia? The United States military. Maliki has a better militia than anybody else. He went to Basra, didn't tell the Americans, and who came and rescued him? the American military, the strongest military in the world. And so it is very much in his interest to have them as his backers. That's his firepower. And when they're gone, his power diminishes quite a bit. Some people say he's a little bit delusional about that he doesn't realize that. But very much so. I mean, he has that support. And so come the next administration, will he have that? We'll see.
Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this series of interviews with Layla Fadel, McClatchy Bureau Chief in Baghdad. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the real news every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.